Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
So today is the day where I answer your questions about anything. And, you know, I've actually been doing a good bit of research to answer one of these two questions. And, well, I still don't really know the answer to the question. Actually, I don't know the answer to either question. And I'll explain why I don't know the answer to either question as I'm giving you the questions and the answers. The first question that I'm going to tackle seems like it would be one that is very easy. The question is Ross Perot running for president in 2016? And while I say, on the one hand, it seems like it should be pretty easy, the reason I can't answer this question is because, well, there's still time to get into the race. Now, Ross Perot, as of right now, this moment, has not said he's running for president. So at this exact moment, no, he is not running for president. However, let's look back at 1992 for a second. And actually, for this to be an accurate comparison, we need to look back to 1991. August of 1991. And in August of 1991, Ross Perot was not running for president in 1992. He did not make the announcement until February of 1992 that he was running for president in 1992. So it's really only been within the last couple of election cycles that people have started, like, you know, quote-unquote major candidates have started running their campaigns like 2 years before the election. So, like, let's look at some of the historical, and I hate the term third party, but it's the term that gets used, and I'll explain why I hate the term third party a bit later on. But, you know, let's look at some of these major candidates that wound up being a factor in some of these elections. So in 1980, and you heard me mention this on Monday briefly when I was talking about the impact or the claim that certain candidates that aren't major candidates wind up running a spoiler effect and costing someone the election. And the claim in 1980 that a lot of people feared was that John Anderson would have wound up possibly harming Ronald Reagan and giving the election to Jimmy Carter. Well, John Anderson had not decided to run as an independent candidate until after he had lost a couple of Republican Party primaries. So it was in the year 1980. Like, I forget exactly when, but I'm thinking it was like March or April of 1980. If we look even further back, it was, I believe, April of 1968 when George Wallace decided that he was going to run outside of the two major parties. In 1924, I think it was Fighting Bob LaFollette, who ran as, I think it was a Progressive Party candidate. He had not decided to run until like June. In 1908, Teddy Roosevelt, it was like June or July when he decided that he was going to challenge William Howard Taft and run for president again. And of all of the elections that I just mentioned, the only one where someone played a spoiler could theoretically be said in 1908 that William Howard Taft actually was a spoiler for Teddy Roosevelt. Otherwise, no, the whole, like, if you vote for candidate X, you're giving your vote to candidate Y. Like, it's not true. It is absolutely not true. And I wish people would stop believing it. So that sort of explains why I can't answer the question, because in 1991, in August of 1991, Ross Perot had not announced that he was running for president in 1992. Again, it was like February. So the question is he running in 2016? If he is, he's not announced it. And, if history serves as any indicator, if he's going to run, it would, probably be early next year before he announces, based on when he announced in 1991. Now, of course, there are some restrictions and deadlines and whatnot that would need to be met for a minor party, and I much prefer the term minor party, and I'll explain why momentarily. But there are ballot access hurdles and deadlines that minor party candidates need to meet. So it is beneficial on the one hand to try to start early, but at the same time there are states like New Hampshire where you are prohibited from collecting petitions before the year of the election. So on the one hand you need to start early, but at the same time, you can't start too early because some states say you can't do that. So before I get into the next question that is most likely going to take the remainder of the show, I want to explain why I hate the term third party. Because the term third party subliminally or subconsciously implies that there should only be two. Because we're told, like, America's a two-party system, right? Like, that's the claim. We're told that America's a two-party system. You've got the Republicans, you've got the Democrats, those are your two parties, and anybody else is a third party. Well, no, they're not. Because all you really need to do is look at a handful of states where they actually have a thriving third party, an actual third party, and then they don't call anything else a fourth party. There's a legal distinction in a lot of places between major party and minor party. So major party is a party that reaches a certain vote threshold or has a certain number of registered voters or meets some other statutory requirement. A minor party in the statutes is a party that has not yet obtained major party status, and in some cases also has met some level of something. So in Florida, a minor party is any party that is organized and has sent a copy of their bylaws and a copy of, like, here's our officers. Same thing in Mississippi and a couple of other states. In Vermont, for example, they actually have three parties that are represented in their legislature: the Republicans, the Democrats, and the Progressives. In Minnesota, they've got the Republicans, the Democratic Farm Labor Party, and then the Independence Party. And there have been other parties that are, somewhat active that are minor party, not quite major party status, but they have ballot access and other stuff. And then in Alaska, for example, there's what's called a political organization that is not a minor party by statute, but they're seeking to become one. So that is why I hate the term third party, because it implies there should only be two. No, it should be like Baskin, F, and Robbins. There should be 31 flavors or more. Stay tuned. There's more.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davy Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com, all major bookstores, and now available as an audiobook.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs with a story like no other game before. The liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to ZOG.ninja to get your copy of Hypercronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hypercronius, ZOG.ninja, code FPP.
You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, ExpressCoin, and Amazon, at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
So before I get to the next question, and like I said, this question, I don't have the exact answer to. It's like a multi-part question. I don't have the exact answer to part of the question, but I can give you the information that I do have that hopefully helps explain a little bit. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I tell you about Survivor Max. Max is 11 years old, and 11-year-old Max must survive the zombie apocalypse alone in New Hampshire. The slow-moving, non-thinking lame brains swarm his home searching for living flesh. Max must apply his Porcupine Freedom Scouts training to plan his escape, but first, he must prove that he's too smart to die. Look for Survivor Max on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, or you can actually read that very first chapter of the book absolutely free at survivormax.com. That's survivormax.com. So the question that I partially have the answer to and partially do not have the answer to is this. The question comes from a friend. I forget if this was in an email, a Facebook message, or posted on Sue, but it says, my sister posted this, and it's a picture of a contaminated river, and she claims it was actually the EPA that caused it. AMA question, was it? And what actually happened? Well, the first part of this I can answer very easily. Yes. Yes, the EPA did actually wind up contaminating a river in Colorado. And yes, that picture that you saw was actually the contaminated river. And the most recent update that I saw said over 3 million gallons of contaminated wastewater have leaked into the river. Now, the question of what actually happened. Now, this is something that is a bit of a mystery. And I actually did a Google search for what caused Colorado EPA spill, and one of the headlines was wastewater leaking faster than the EPA gives answers. So basically the EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency, you know, that agency that the kneelers say without them there would be contaminated water. Well, with them there's contaminated water too, so what is your point? So the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the agency that is supposedly tasked with keeping our rivers clean, has done something to cause nearly 3 million gallons, actually over 3 million gallons of contaminated wastewater to seep into and leak out of a mine into a river that apparently is traveling now into New Mexico. So I've got a fairly lengthy story from the Washington Post that kind of answers the question, but not really. So the article here, and I'll just let me first read a very short summary from the Denver Post. And I say a short summary because it's a lot shorter than the Washington Post article, and I think the Washington Post actually links over to the Denver Post in a couple of spots. But the Denver Post article says environmental officials have been working for years to clear toxic metals and acidic water from Colorado's roughly 22,000 abandoned mines. The difficulty of that effort was clear Wednesday when the EPA accidentally released a 1 million gallon flow of wastewater. And this article here from the Denver Post that says 1 million gallons, this was one of the initial posts that came out like 2 days after the thing happened. And then an update came out Sunday saying, no, it was actually 3 million and it's still leaking 500 gallons a minute. So, that's going to approach 4 million rather rapidly unless they wind up stopping it. So the EPA accidentally released a 1 million gallon, we now know to be well over 3 million gallon flow of wastewater into a watershed targeted over the past several decades for cleanup. The Bureau of Land Management had even highlighted the Animas River as one of 3 environmental priority areas in Colorado affected by mine waste. The Gold King mine, the source of the spill, had been eyed for cleanup by environmentalists and federal and state officials since at least 2005. The EPA was at the site Wednesday with heavy machinery when the spill occurred. The mine's owners say a plug had failed, but they don't say what caused it to fail. That they aren't saying, and this is the thing that is so irritating and so annoying, is they're just saying, we accidentally caused a leak and a plug failed. Okay, but what caused the plug to fail? Now, it says here, and I can put 2 and 2 together, but in this case, I'm not sure if I have a 2 and another 2, and I'm putting them together, and I'm thinking I'm getting 4, but I might only have like 1.952, and maybe I've got 2.01. I'm not really sure because I don't have the info. I'm just being told, like, here's a 2 and here's a 2, and add them together, and it's 4, but it doesn't make sense. They're saying that they were there with heavy machinery. They accidentally released a flow of nearly 3 million gallons of wastewater and a plug failed. But again, they're not saying exactly what happened or why it happened or how it happened. Elizabeth Holly, an assistant professor of mining engineering at the Colorado School of Mines, said the great news is that modern mining does not allow the release of these waters. The bad news is we owe our statehood to mining prior to any environmental regulations. She adds that until 1977, mining laws in Colorado were minimal. That's actually not from the woman from the School of Mines. That is actually a statement from Jenny Brannon, director of the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety. Now, here's something that I find interesting. And I'll actually tell you after I read this quote from Brannon. She says, folks could go out and do what they want and walk away from the site, and this is on them. The main concern from my perspective, she says, is continuing to restore and safeguard these old turn-of-the-century mines so that public health and safety of wildlife are protected. Now, they're saying that, well, there were no regulations, so people could just pollute. That's not a lack of regulations that allowed that to happen. That's a lack of the ability of people to claim ownership over land that allowed, or actually in some ways encouraged, people to not be responsible. And the reason I say it encouraged people to not be responsible is it's what's called the tragedy of the commons. When nobody owns it, nobody cares. If you go to a lake that nobody owns and they say, only catch the big fish, what do you care? You don't own the lake. You don't own the fish. You're going to catch all the big fish you can because it's a great story. There's more, and I'll explain a little bit more in depth when we come back.
Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Opening a wallet is quick and easy, and for merchants, there are no transaction fees on the first $1 million worth of transactions. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's FANS.fppradio.com. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Now, before I finish explaining the tragedy of the commons and how a free market could have probably prevented this spill from happening the way that it did, I want to make sure that I tell you about Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They also take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on investing and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 850-478-5270 or visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. So the tragedy of the commons allowed this to happen, not a lack of regulations. And the reason I say that is, let's imagine for an instant that you own a house, and the house is on, let's say, 3 acres of property. And let's say that there's a stream running through your property, like right through the middle of the property, not on the edge. It's not one of these, like the stream is the, backside of the property and I own everything to the stream. No, let's imagine here that it runs straight through your property, and you've got a little bridge on it, and you've got, like a picnic table or something on the other side of the stream, but the stream runs through your property. Now, let's imagine for a second that your neighbor, the stream also runs through his property, and let's imagine that he has farm animals. Doesn't really matter what kind of farm animal, but he has farm animals. And there are fish in this stream, okay? So he's got farm animals, there's fish in the stream runs through both of your property, and he decides, you know what, I've really got a lot of manure, and I can't use it as fertilizer, and you don't want it for fertilizer because you're not growing any crops, but, whatever, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to throw the manure into the stream. And he winds up throwing a bunch of manure into the stream, and it kills the fish. Now, has he harmed your property? Yes, he has, because he has polluted the stream that runs through your property. So that is your stream from property line to property line. That's your stream. So if someone pollutes the stream that goes into your property, it's the same as someone vandalizing your physical property that you can touch, and you can touch water, but it's not the same molecule of water that's going to be there in 20 minutes as it is right now. But, like if somebody throws paint on your house, like that is vandalism. Same sort of thing. It's a property crime if you own a river and someone pollutes the river. But that's not what happened here. What happened here is no one owns the river, no one owns the actual mountain, and the lady here from the Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety claims that it was a lack of regulations that allowed this to happen. No, it was a lack of private ownership that encouraged this to happen. Now, let's go back to the analogy of the neighbor. If he knows that he can be sued for contaminating the river and basically vandalizing your property and preventing you from fishing in the stream that you have running through your property, he will be a lot less likely to pollute the river. But if he knows he can get away with it, that there's nobody that can do or say anything about him doing it, then he's not going to care. You know what? I've got a lot of poo. Let's throw it in the river. Or maybe he won't actually throw it in the river, but he'll dig a drainage ditch so that it just runs there naturally, and then he can, plausible deniability, I didn't put anything in the river. It flowed there on its own. Blame God. But again, that is not what happened. The article here from the Denver Post continues. It says, scientists say Colorado's mineral-rich mountains were shedding toxic metals and acids long before prospectors began digging for profit, but mining sped up the process. Holly said Cement Creek, where the Gold King spill happened, was deemed undrinkable in 1876, long before mining had become widespread in the area. She said this is sort of a punctuated release of water, which is unfortunate, but this watershed has had major acid rock damage for a century. And this is something that the first several reports I was reading about this did not mention, that this particular river, or actually in this case it was a creek, was actually contaminated naturally. And the reason it was contaminated, or not the reason, but the way in which it was contaminated naturally, is because it flows right next to some mountains, and these mountains have metals in them. And when it rains and there's underwater, like creeks and streams and whatnot, and these things are flowing through the mountain, and they're picking up small bits of the metals that are in the mountain, and they're flowing into the creek. So, like there are places where there's fluoride naturally in the water. And you find that a lot. I've heard here in New Hampshire from the limestone, apparently, or not limestone, but like limestone and granite do something, and there's a type of fluoride that comes naturally from those rocks, and the rivers roll over it. So there's small amounts, but it's not this chemically altered fluoride that is considered like dangerous to touch, that municipalities are putting in the drinking water. It's a different type of fluoride than that, but some of it is natural. So the metals are in there naturally because of underwater streams and whatnot. And so this creek was already contaminated, but it was not this bright yellow orangish color. So let me now, in these remaining moments, jump over into the Washington Post article that, and they actually say, while working to clean a mine in the San Juan Mountains, workers with the EPA unintentionally made the problem worse, that being the contaminated river. A plug at the Gold King mine site failed. The mine owners told the Denver Post it released 3 million gallons of toxic yellow sludge into Colorado's waterway. By Sunday night, the plume had reached Farmington, New Mexico, more than 100 miles to the south. The site of the wastewater, long pent up in a mine that hasn't been operational since 1922, shocked the state and put the EPA in the hot seat. Why was the agency using heavy machinery at a site known to be full of toxins? The answer, like the wastewater itself, is part of Colorado's history. And then they go back and they give a history of mining in Colorado. and they never answer the question about why the EPA was using heavy machinery. So I hate to say, but I don't know the answer to the question. Hey, that's the show. This has been Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Don't forget, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, online, FPPradio.com.